This podcast is brought to you by AC Lighting, world-class products with world-class service. aclighting.com. This is the Tech Arts Podcast, where we talk about tech, leadership, and all things that concern church audio, video, and lighting.
Welcome to the Tech Arts Podcast in the Earthworks Audio Studios. My name is DL. So glad to have you joining us today. Coming up on the Tech Arts Podcast is a discussion with Dave Hatmaker on professionalism. Dave has worked with Vice President Dan Quayle, Neil Armstrong, Bob Iger, Gloria Estefan, Shakira, Martina McBride, New Kids on the Block, and many other artists. He has also worked for Walt Disney and is a former member of the Yamaha Global Research and Development Team. We talk about what it means to serve, what's the difference between a manager and a leader, why professionalism is important, and we chat about compromise and how learning this is very important to having a great service or show. It's a very interesting interview, and you don't want to miss it. Speaking of interesting, on today's installment of the Paragon Angle, we talk about rigging. That is coming up in just a few minutes. Right now, let's hear about mic techniques with Earthworks Audio. On today's segment, we talk about the 5 levels of capturing choir sound. Joining us in this discussion is the marketing manager for Earthworks Audio, Nick Canovas. Nick, my solution for choir miking is to just not even have a choir. Get rid of them and just have band and vocals. But I must admit, that is taking the easy way out. So if I'm looking for a great choir miking solution, I hear Earthworks Audio has microphones that can really bring a choir back to life.
We absolutely do. Bold strategy, too, of not having a choir. I might take you up on that at some point.
Yeah, it's like no choir, no problem, right? But yep, all fun aside, it's true. A lot of churches, they don't have to have a choir. They have contemporary bands and things of that nature. But some churches, the choir's the thing. That's what they have to have, and that's what they rely on. So how does Earthworks resolve the choir miking problem?
Well, first, it comes down to recognizing the core issue at hand, which is the fact that miking a choir can be quite difficult. You've got a lot of different voices in one space. You have to deal with the acoustics of the space itself. And just finding a microphone that can solve that issue for you of just making your choir sound as rich and as full and as beautiful as it should, while taking into account the aspects of the space that you're in, it's a lot to ask of any piece of gear. Earthworks has our flagship choir miking system, the FlexWand FW730, and that's really taken off in houses of worship. It's a fully integrated boom stand system that captures choirs effortlessly. You throw 3 of these on your choir of like 20, 30, 40 people, and you're going to be getting a brilliant and, most importantly, a unified sound. The generous polar pattern means that you're not getting sound that is just focusing on one singer that's right in front of the microphone. It's generous. It's going to give you that rich, blended sound that you're looking for. And to dive into this further, we think about choir miking as something like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, though we call it the hierarchy of choir miking needs. So at the first level, the bottom level, you have simply avoiding bad things. So that's no distortion, that's no feedback, that's no harshness, that's nothing that would actively cause a listener who doesn't know anything about audio to like wince or to think like, oh, there was an issue there. What was going on? So that's level 1. Level 2 is maintaining control, which is just simply, you have a firm grasp on your mix. There may not necessarily be anything fancy about it, but at the very least, you don't have any issues with it. Here, your main tools and what you're going to be using to get to this level are mic placement, which is key in any situation, but especially with miking a choir. And of course, any sort of basic signal processing that you throw on at first. So that might be EQ, compression, anything like that. The third level is intelligibility. So at level 2, you have a sound that is passable, and you have your choir that's being heard, but what are they saying? What are the words that they're trying to get across? What's the meaning that they're trying to convey to the audience? And that's what level 3 is all about. You want the words to actually be intelligible, and in tandem with that as well, you want the voices to blend together in a tangible way. You don't want one singer or a handful of singers just poking out in the mix. You want something that is unified. You want a body of voices coming together as one. And that's where level 3 is going to get you.
So yeah, you also want your choir to blend with the system, right? You don't want it to stick out like here's these people sitting over here and then the band over here. You want it to blend so it feels natural between the speakers and what's happening on the platform, right, Nick?
Absolutely. And that's where the fourth level of this pyramid comes into play, which is presence. You know, a lot of people, when they're micing choirs, their only goal is just to get something that's decent. Like they set up the mics, the choir sounds fine. It gets them up to level 3 of this pyramid. But what we try to do with our choir miking solutions is make it so that getting to that third level is instantaneous. You set up the microphones and they already bring you to that level so that you then can really spend your time not on setting up and not on trying to just get a passable sound, but to really bring out the artistry in your choir and to really create an experience that is second to none for your audience. And so, yeah, level 4 is presence, that idea of, you want to make the sound bigger, but not necessarily louder. You really want to master that blend so that the PA and the choir almost become one. And the idea that there's technology present really fades away. And it really becomes about that one-to-one connection with the audience and the ensemble. And that's where we get to level 5, which is just emphasizing art and creativity. You are now mixing and capturing sound at a point where you can fully focus on bringing out everything that your choir is giving you and really bringing out that sound. So any sort of signal processing that you're doing is not done for corrective purposes. It's really done to enhance creativity. And that's what our tools, that's what our choir miking solutions are meant to do. They're meant to get you to that point where you're really delving into the creativity, not only for yourself as an engineer, but for your congregation as well. Because when that process is made easier, that's going to make their lives easier, and then they get to focus on their craft as well. And the end result is just an incredible choir sound for your audience.
So you talked a little bit about the FW730. We're looking at it right here. It's a beautiful microphone. But talk to us a little bit about the C30 and the P30. What's the difference between that and the FW730?
Absolutely. So the use case is the primary difference. The C30 is meant for hanging installations. So if you want a choir mic, but you don't want the integrated boom stand that the FlexWand offers, the C30 comes with an included 30-foot Canare Star Quad cable that you can hang from the ceiling. It's a very easy solution, no difficulty in setting it up. And then the P30 is if you want that same sound from the C30 and the FlexWands, but you want it in a more conventional microphone setup that comes with an XLR port. So if you want more flexibility in how you use the microphone, maybe you want a choir microphone that can also work for capturing instruments or even the podium if you wanted to. If you really want something that is flexible and all around an excellent mic, the P30 is the mic for you.
For more information on Earthworks Audio, go to earthworksaudio.com. They make choir miking simple. earthworksaudio.com. From sold-out stadiums to intimate live performance venues, sound engineers agree on one thing for the best digital mixing consoles for live sound. The only name that matters is Digico. As the recognized worldwide standard for live audio mixing, Digico consoles are renowned for their industry-leading sound quality and ease of use. Whether your application is in a church, broadcast, theater, corporate, sports, or installed sound, Digico offers compact and affordable products. From the S21 all the way up to the pioneering power of the Quantum 852, Digico delivers the workflow, the feature set, and the absolute reliability that the world's biggest tours and programs have come to rely upon. If you're looking for a sound console, look to Digico for your answer. For more information on Digico, go to digico.biz. That's digico.biz. Right now, let's hear from Paragon 360 and the Paragon Angle.
Rigging in the church space. If you're a pastor, you might say, why do I care about that? If you're an executive pastor, you might say, I don't want to pay for that. The tech guy's thinking, my AVL integrator is going to handle that, right? Welcome to the Paragon Angle. Today, we're going to talk about rigging in the church space. Paragon 360 learned early on from the theatrical and entertainment work that we used to do for the Radio City Christmas Spectacular and large format multi-million-dollar corporate events for Walmart, Prestonwood's Christmas events, and many others, that professional rigging of audio, video, and lighting equipment was top priority all day and twice on Sunday. What many overlook, however, is that it's also a big deal in today's churches. In our experience, this is typically the biggest unrealized liability for the church. Let's keep in mind that most of these church spaces were built 30, 40, 50 years ago. Were not designed to hold the kind of weight we're trying to hold today. Almost all buildings are built on a tight budget, and if they were not planning for the support of line arrays, LED walls 50 years ago, chances are the structure is not designed to support it today. So a large percentage of the platforms, stages, are bigger than the original ones were 30 years ago. And so that pushes the PA downstage, pushes the lighting further into the house to keep the angles right for video and all that stuff. That makes it very hard to get to, so we want to motorize it. But can we? Now we're flying subs half the time. Most of this was not even a consideration 25, 30, 40 years ago. Now, there are those churches and techs that are trying to save money and do things in-house, and they buy a pile of gear from Sweetwater and have a buddy come and hang it. When it comes to rigging, I would reconsider. However, for many, it's well-intentioned because the technical staff thinks they can trust their integrators to cover it. It's so common for churches to hire someone to sell them equipment and install it, right? But they may have no idea if the people that are hanging this heavy equipment over the heads of the congregation really know what they're doing. A big majority of those integrators do whatever they need to get it rigged and installed because what they're really trying to do at the end of the day is sell gear. But so many of them do not have qualified riggers on staff for the design or execution. They may claim they've been doing this forever, but it doesn't mean they're using certified professionals, and it does not mean they really know what they're doing. It's not a risk you want to take when it comes to rigging. One of the biggest issues we see is people using unrated hardware. If an item you're looking at doesn't state a working load limit, then it's not appropriate for use in overhead rigging. This could include most, if not all, the hardware found at your local hardware store. We see improper methods, a failure to understand the math in figuring loads and distribution. Overloading can lead to catastrophic failures. So here are a few questions. Has your integrator asked you for structural drawings? Has a structural engineer approved the weight loads? Has the integrator shown you a rigging design indicating weight loads and its distribution? Do you understand the weight loads of your structure? Do you recognize safe rigging points when you see them? Is your team familiar with the operation of rigging systems or use of rigging hardware? Is your integrator using rated hardware? Here's the bottom line. Your integrators should be ETCP rigging certified. ETCP rigging refers to the Entertainment Technician Certification Program's rigging certification, which is a rigorous assessment of professional technicians in the rigging industry. Rigging is a big deal in today's AVL world, regardless of the venue. Ensuring a safe rigging environment is paramount, and it starts by hiring professionals. Ensuring that your audio, video, and lighting integrators are using ETCP certified riggers for the design and execution of the project. And yes, that's right. This is not just about execution. It has to be designed. Paragon 360 has extensive experience from arenas to theaters, churches, both small and large. I can tell you this, church rigging is very challenging and sometimes extremely complicated because, again, these spaces were not designed to do what we're trying to do today, so we have to get creative. A theater is built for rigging, right? A concert venue has lots of steel to support touring shows and events. Many of these churches were installing line shaft systems to raise and lower heavy LED walls in places that no one could have even imagined it would fit. It took lots of math, experience, structural analysis, and approval, along with intricate design to make that happen. We use ETCP certified riggers for the design and installation of our projects, and you should too. For more information on Paragon, check out paragon360.com. I hope this was helpful, and we'll see you on the next Paragon Angle.
Our main sponsor is Digital Great Commission Ministries. Whether you need help building a team, finding the right gear, or just better understanding the church tech world, DGCM is here for you. Because they are a 501c3 donor-sponsored organization, they come to your church for free and do an assessment of your tech, visitor engagement, and online streaming. Plus, we give away free gear. Be sure to go to audiovideolighting.com and register your email today. This will sign you up for all of the free giveaways and give you first access to everything we offer for free. If you want free resources, training, or consulting, contact Digital Great Commission Ministries today by going to audiovideolighting.com. That's audiovideolighting.com.
This podcast is brought to you by AC Lighting, world-class products with world-class service. aclighting.com.
Today's guest is a 30-plus year professional audio vet with a diverse background in live sound mixing, product development, sound design, and industry education. He has worked with the likes of Vice President Dan Quayle, Neil Armstrong, Bob Iger, Gloria Estefan, Shakira, Martina McBride, New Kids on the Block, and many other artists. Wow. But hey, that's not all. He was a seasoned sound designer for Walt Disney, a former member of Yamaha's global research and development team. We got some questions for that one. As well as a featured panelist at AES and NAMM. Please welcome to the Tech Arts Podcast, Dave Hatmaker. Hey, Dave.
Wow. Thanks, David, for that really, really awesome lead-in. Wow.
Man, your bio is exhausting in a good way, though. So many cool jobs in so little time, right? You're only what, 35 years old?
Right. Yep, just turned 40.
That's right. That's right. But give us, I flew through that pretty quick. New Kids on the Block I stumbled on New Kids on the Block a little bit. I can't believe you worked with New Kids on the Block, man. I remember listening to them like
hanging
over and over.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Front of house engineer, or yes, were you part of, front of house? Did you go on their tour?
No, they came into Disneyland. So,
oh, cool.
Yeah. I started a small sound company with my brother, and, we did regional stuff around Southern California, and I went to school to be a drummer, which I shout out to my parents that got me through that. I have a Bachelor of Arts in Percussion Performance. How are you going to make a living at that, right? But out of school, I started into theme parks, and I went to Knott's Berry Farm for a bit, which is a theme park out here. I got my first kind of corporate church gig at Crystal Cathedral out here. And then while I was at Crystal Cathedral, I'd heard some people talking about that Disneyland was hiring technicians. Well, I was already an audio guy. And I went there, had a brief interview. I knew two or three of the people that were on the panel that were doing the hiring. And I got hired, and bam, I was off to the races with these crazy headline talent things and how Disney did entertainment. And so we used to say, we got acts going up, and we got acts going down. So we caught like New Kids on the Block just as they had maybe 2 or 3 hits, but the contract had been done like 8 months before that. So away they come, and we get their rider, and we do 8 nights of New Kids on the Block, and then they hit, platinum.
Yeah, man, that sounds like a lot of fun being able to sit behind the console for those guys. But all right, so that was a few years ago. What console did you mix on for New Kids on the Block?
I used a PM3000
analog, baby.
Yeah, it had just changed out of there was a time where there was a PM2000 and there was an M3208, or there was an M class. We didn't have a PM2000 there. We had an M, and it went to PM3000 when I took over that venue.
So, part of your background there was working for Yamaha. Tell us a little bit about that and that experience, because I know a lot of great consoles came from your mind with some of your product development and things of that nature. Kind of tell our audience a little bit about that experience.
Yeah, they through the Disney stuff and through some being in close geographic area, just Buena Park to Anaheim is maybe 10 miles away. I got to know all the people at Yamaha, and they'd come over and we'd have lunch or whatever. And they'd see that we, had PM3000s and 3500s and 4Ks and DM2000s and a couple of odd things. We were just getting ready to open up a show. It was called Hunchback, and it was the director wanted theater in the round and theater around you. So as a crazy designer, I was already thinking of how would we do that. And one afternoon, I got to go up to Buena Park because they had called and said, hey, we got something that you could look at. And it was an O2R. And on the O2R, there was you could change some routing to a SMPTE number, and you could change it had dynamic automation. And I went, can I buy that today? I'll buy 2. Because I was thinking this will already do what I want it to do. And they go, no, it can't be ready yet. So they pushed us off, but they did get it in time. And for that show, I did have the first 2 O2Rs. And that began my kind of synergy with Yamaha of how I would ask for a particular feature, or they would enable it in firmware or whatever. And that went through bits of console development. And funny, on that show of Hunchback, we had the first 16 U-class UHF Shure units that was being alpha and beta tested there on that show. And we had the first 20 Crest CKS amplifiers at the time. So Hunchback was a proving ground for many people.
A lot of firsts. It was like, give me all the first pieces of gear. You know what's cool, though, is all of them were really, really good pieces of gear, though. The O2R, I used it in several theater applications back in the day.
Right.
And I don't know if anybody knows what back in the day means.
Right.
But that means a long time ago. And the O2R was just amazing how you could lock it to time code and do I would use it to do surround effects and things of that nature.
Right. We had 2 Fostex ADAT machines, and one of them had a stripe of SMPTE on it, and the whole show ran. We still mixed all the microphones, but the track part of the show was fully automated, and it hit some magazine articles, and those things actually kind of helped actually push a trajectory of Broadway in a couple of ways.
So that started your relationship with Yamaha. Did they hire you from Disney?
The company was going to build a second theme park in the Anaheim resort property there for Disneyland, and it was going to be called California Adventure. And in that, the leg that does they build theme parks, WDI, Walt Disney Imagineering, they wanted to put a dark theater in there, and it would have been the first dark theater in the whole company. So a 2,000 seat, downright legit theatrical theater. They'd put some programming restrictions on it that they were going to be wanting to at least have 2 shows mounted, 2 like Broadway theatrical size shows. They wanted to be able to do cinema in there. And they also wanted to be able to do like awards presentations and then internal events. So I had a vast array of things that I needed the actual theater to be able to accomplish. And it wasn't quite able to be done with the parts that were available then. So there would have been maybe Soundcraft had a Broadway console, I think, that was a digital console, and there were some homebrew other people that had a digital console. Well, Buena Park Yamaha guys caught wind of that, and they said, there's something that you really want to see. And so again, I got to see the PM1D, and I said, can I buy them today? No, you can't buy them today. So anyway, they made a deal with us and the Walt Disney Company, where that would be an alpha beta test site before we opened, because we had such a long lead time for it to actually be built before it would have guests in there. So the public would be in there. So it was a great place. We could close the doors, and we actually had some writing on a couple of the walls. The stealth lives here, So we had the first PM1D in there, and we were sending them notes almost daily on, we found this, whatever, maybe that's a bug, or maybe that's a feature. We don't know how to do that, whatever. And they would come almost every day and grab our analog notebook and take that back and refine it as it went. So when that console launched, it was really good, really stable, really great, sounded great, looked great. And from then they would go back to Japan every so often, and they would say that they needed an R&D guy. And it took about a year, 16 months that they were coming to me going, we really need an R&D guy. It should be you. Anyway, so they headhunted me away from Disneyland, and I left Disneyland and went right there. The first week I had 5 days of meetings and then was on a plane to Japan doing R&D for the next gen project. It's pretty great.
You just said a console that I have fond memories of, and that's the PM1D. Now, obviously, the Tech Arts podcast is sponsored by Digico. They make a great console. It's my favorite console out there, the 338, and some of the consoles that they have are just blowing me away right now. But back, late 90s, early 2000s, when the PM1D came on the scene, that was my console. That's what I mixed on. I was coming from the analog world and was kind of a little nervous about the whole digital console thing, but I got on the PM1D. I was fast. I was quick on it, which was, my concern. The recall, it never crashed on me. Right. It was the most stable console I had worked. I would say, even when digital consoles started coming out, I would say Yamaha PM1D was the most stable console.
Exactly.
So I got to ask you a question, since you went over to Yamaha. Why did they let the PM1D die?
So I'm going to put my Yamaha hat on corporately, and I don't know that it still follows the same corporate rules today, but at the time, they would support a project or a particular product for X amount of years, right? And you'd be able to get a screw or a fader or a knob or a whatever throughout its end of product life. And they would support anybody on whatever that was, a clavinova or a piano or a whatever Yamaha part that was. And so the PM1D got to the point where they couldn't get some 2 or 3 XYZ parts. So they said, well, we have this many. We anticipate there's this many. We have to stop it on this day. And they drew a line in the sand, and that's what it was. So they couldn't support it on their end for any time after this. Because we were saying at the time, shoot, just change the pan to an encoder. It was a lot of real estate to just have a pan knob at the time, right? So just change that to an encoder and change the screen to a touch screen and continue on. Well, that didn't fly. So,
well, was there ever a PM2D? Like, were they ever looking at launching a different version of the PM1D, or was it just, hey, we want to go the small console format? And because those consoles were awesome, the smaller consoles that came out were pretty amazing. And I know Yamaha probably made a ton of money off of those. But did they ever think PM2D? Like,
I don't even think it's a secret now, but I was brought on to do that next gen console, right? So they had, I inherited, so PM1D, I had as a third party kind of a evaluator, I had a lot to do. Well, I had input to do with PM5D, M7, and I knew that LS9 was coming. And so I inherited LS9. So I helped LS9 along with their version 2. But I really didn't have development of that, because what I was brought on for, and then just slightly after me, was Chris Taylor out of Nashville. There was 5 of us that were building the next gen after PM1D. So you could call it a PM2, or, you could call it a PM Next or whatever.
PM1D version 2, whatever.
Right. That console made it very far. I'll be careful in corporately of what I can say, but let's say it made it really, really far until it came to the point where it couldn't be released for some bunch of XYZ reasons. So quickly, we scrambled. We went to Japan. We had 5 days on our own, where R&D went into a small place, and we worked Friday, Saturday, Sunday for like 10-hour days in a room with a absolute whiteboard, and we had a digital camera. And over that weekend, we kind of came up for the whole product line and support, and at least a GUI and a specification list of CL/then QL. And then, so all the parts, all the thinking and mindset that tried to go into this next PM got focused into CLQL.
Makes sense, man.
Right.
Let me change the subject on you a little bit. Kind of staying on consoles here, but as someone who's worked for Yamaha, Disney, megachurches, all consoles on the table, what's your favorite console to work with?
Right now, it's the PM5.
The PM5?
I really like the 3 screens. I really like that I can bank in. I can link banks together so I can get 24 things to kind of cycle through. So with 24 handles, I can still do a fair amount of great mixing, and then I've got 12 DCAs. That's how I set it up. And so I'm looking at some different data on all 3 screens. And on the right screen, I'm looking at kind of my output, my secret sauce, output comps, that kind of flavor. And then over here, I'm being able to dive in and I can look at 2 things at the same time. I can see my lead singer and I can see my guitar, or, whatever it takes. But it's easy for me to get around on it, and mix 100 channels is not a problem. It just is actually pretty easy. You go, oh, that's just 4 layers deep and whatever. And I can get there 2 ways. It's not even like even a challenge anymore.
That's cool. So the Yamaha PM5, that's your favorite, huh?
Yes, I helped with a lot of the GUI development and where the buttons went, and we did ray studies and angle studies, and so yeah, I guess when your fingerprints are on it, that's the one that you kind of go to.
Yeah, the reason you know it so well is because you built it.
Right.
you physically this is where I want to put everything, and then they made the console for you.
And it's a giant team of humans. It's not me. It's a giant team of humans. But when you've seen it for 5 or 6 years and you say, oh, can that move just right there?
So it wasn't just you, Dave. You didn't build it from scratch and build all the diodes and
it's
all
just
the
a
circuit
sea
boards.
Of humans working on things. Yeah. It is. That's a fact.
Well, the reason why we're having you on, Dave, is we wanted to talk about the subject of professionalism. I know we kind of got into the console thing, which is fun to talk about, and history there. But, I think this is missing kind of in today's marketplace. Professionalism, how to handle yourself professionally, what on time means. No, it doesn't mean you show up on time. It means you show up early. So let me hit you with this first question about professionalism. Why is it even important? And let me add to that.
Sure.
The reason why I'm asking that question is I run into a lot of, I'll call them kids, but in their 20s and 30s. And they're just doing a lot of things that when I was in the industry and mixing and gigging every week, I would have gotten fired for doing some of those things. If I didn't show up early to a gig, if I showed up late, I didn't have the gig anymore. And it doesn't seem to be a concern for this generation. And I think it should be. So that's kind of what's behind that question. Why is professionalism important?
I think it's one of the things right now that can set you apart. If you behave professionally and you show up at the show ready, you have your tools, whatever those are, you have your headphones, or, if you're a carpenter, you have your small bit of hand tools or whatever it is. If you're a lighting guy, you show up and you have your plot. You already show up ready to do the task. And I think it doesn't start the moment that you start on the clock. And that's a sad thing to say, but I know if I get a call to go mix a XYZ band, I'm going to go on Spotify and I'm going to find out, hopefully I know who XYZ band is, but I'm going to try to make in my head XYZ band. Well, let's use New Kids on the Block because that's an older band that at the time is you went and you got the CD and you listen to them and you go, oh, I know that. That's on the radio. And you try to make it sound like that. Because in my brain, if we were to make everything sound the way I would think it would sound, it'd sound like Toto meets Steely Dan, right? So that's where I live in. That's perfection to me. But if it's a grunge band, I'm certainly not gonna, let's say, overgate or if it's a jazz band, I'm not going to gate at all. So you're already thinking of what does the band sound like before you even arrive. And then it's when you get on site, do you know the tools? Do you know, oh, it's a Digico console and I better know it's an SD9, or I know this around, or it's a Yamaha and it's a CL3, not a CL5. Oh, I should know what that is. Or it's a QL, or it's an S6, or you should have all those things already planned out in your head so that when you arrive, you're ready. I think a lot of kind of new engineers, let's say they're coming from church. Well, they've had the same setup all the time, and they kind of come in and I know this setup, but that's a whole different everything than when you're stuck in a hotel ballroom and no one knows the PA and you're expected to know the PA, right? So the professionalism goes quite deep and wide at the same time. If you're brought in as an A2, I hope and expect you to know whatever RF units are on the gig, that you know how to program them. You know, whatever you're brought in for, you should be able to know what it is. A lighting guy, is it on a Grand MA? I expect you to know that your way around on a Grand MA. Or you're a different lighting console person. Well, did you take the gig because you knew that console? Right. So I think that the professionalism starts way before you show up at the show or at the gig, whatever that is you've got to know what do you expect and what do they expect. And I don't think that's a now generational thing. I think that's everybody that I've probably ever worked for. There's 10 or 15, 20, 25 guys and girls that are they've got it. And then there's kind of the rest. And I don't know how to move the rest up, right?
You know what I hear you saying is professionalism is not necessarily knowing the gear. Professionalism is attitude and engagement. What I hear you saying is if you come to the gig, if you come to the church service and you engage with what you're supposed to do, you have a good attitude. Yeah, of course you need to know how the gear works and be able to mix and some of those things as well. But the word professionalism, I think, is much more than that. I think it's knowing that you're not there for yourself. You're there to serve the company or to serve the church and what their goals are and what their missions are. You're not there to mix front of house for what you think New Kids on the Block should sound like. You're there to mix it for what they think it should sound like because they're the client. Do you agree with that? Is it attitude? Is it engagement? Is that professionalism?
I think so. And I think there's a lot of dynamics that go with that. And I think, let me give you an example. I get called, maybe I've done them 5 or 6 times, whatever, over a couple of years. But there's a band that I work with. It's called Voices of Rock Radio. And they insert 3 or 5 kind of headliners into a band. And it's basically kind of a band that's made up of former guys from Kansas and former guys from Journey. And they do this, it's a kind of an entrepreneur thing where they go out and they help fundraise for Heart Association or a Bible company. Anyway, they go into very nice ballrooms, but a very short window of opportunity of time for them to be the rock band. So maybe I'll come in at noon, the band will arrive at 3, they do a sound check from 4 to 5, and then it's a black tie event, right? So I've got 2 hours to add my professionalism to this. So me and the production manager and the monitor guy, we're all talking, we all know what has to happen. And yet when I get into the ballroom, I'm not actually at that moment thinking, carry on my wayward son, but I am at the same time, right? And I know that at that point at noon o'clock, there's florists in the room and there's art department in the room and maybe the CEO is in the room and all these people that don't do entertainment all year, they're a heart surgeon just yesterday. And today they're helping as a person that's going to be a fundraiser, whatever. So they don't know. So I've changed my philosophy over time of like, used to be, I'd come in and I was the front of house guy with the band and it's going to be me and we're going to do this and whatever. And now I don't. I bring an iPod with smooth jazz and I listen to that and I'm in my head thinking, what won't work? Right. So everybody's still carry on their business. They're not hearing pink noise. They're not hearing a wild snare drum cracking or bass drum or whatever. It's smooth jazz and they're good. And in the meantime, I'm thinking, well, I think that's 200 hertz. So I go back to the console and I do my tuning by ear. And one time in that, there'll be a track that I play that I get it up to 105 or so, but I get there over time. And then when I'm done, the PA will do it. Great. And then I'm out. I'll then check the subwoofers. I'll make sure that those are in alignment so that when the band starts at 3, if I get 8 bars, 16 bars, or I hear the singers sing, we're good. And I've had production companies that have said, we have to go to lunch at 4. You're going to get the PA from 4 till 4:10, and then we have to turn the PA off. Well, that's the sound check time. That's the way it is. So I hear them, I great, and I smile, and I go, okay, turn the PA off, and I put headphones on, and I get it as close as I can do, right? That's what you do, because I'm working for the band. I'm not working for the venue, and I'm not working in the hotel. So it's a mentality shift of really, you kind of got to make it be this big, because they're going to get $4 or $5 million that night. And hopefully they remember the band, and hopefully they remember Carry On My Wayward Son, but hopefully they never remember Dave, because I'm just out of the way.
Yeah. Yeah. You're there to serve, but it kind of brings me to another thing. And it's interesting what you just described when you talked about people that, this is what they normally do. They're normally in the medical profession. Here they are coming in, having to serve. That's similar to a church, right? Similar to volunteering at a church and during the week, you're a car mechanic or, you work in a various, full-time role, and you come into church.
You're operating a camera,
That's right. You got to be a tech person.
Right.
And we talk about serve a lot. You need to serve. You need to, be a part of the organization. It's not about you. It's about the organization. But then that brings me to the balance question. Say you work full-time for a church or you gig full-time, and, you hear us saying, serve, no, it's not about you, it's about the organization. But that could get out of whack. That could get out of balance to where, you're spending too much time on the professional side of things working and ignoring your family and things of that nature. So how have you over the years balanced that? How have you over the years balanced work and family?
Right. And a lot of this is what we do, and making new products or building a new show or going out on tour with a band or whatever. All that's really fun. It is. It's pretty exciting, and you get to go to a crazy city and your Instagram gets to show you, and you're awesome. I kind of hit an epiphany early on, and it was at Disneyland, is my wife and I had our first boy, and it hit me that I'm not just working anymore for me. I'm working for 3. I'm working for myself, my wife, and my son. Wow. And so why am I working so hard at the day thing, and then I never get to see him? Right. So that was an epiphany that hit me really, really hard. So I then go, what if I go to work some other place like Yamaha, I'm going to really try to hold that 40-hour line. And I think I did a pretty good job of it. And they had a lot of good latitude that I could make my own travel schedule when I could be wherever in the world. And it was pretty much just make the meeting. So they would give you latitude of, you could kind of go the day before if you wanted and not do the jet lag thing, or you could go burn the oil and take the train, and whatever it is, you make the 8 o'clock meeting. Okay, that's fair. And then when the meeting was done, you could either stick around the hotel and you go the next day, or you could punch out right then. I really tried, and you could ask both of my kids that, and my younger son was just in town the other day, and he was saying, I really appreciated that you made my concerts all the time. Yeah, because they only get one of those, right? They only get that X amount of concerts or that X amount of science projects or whatever your kids are into, soccer game or whatever. They only get that in that one little bit of time. And I felt like I wanted to be there. I just didn't want to watch the video, or I didn't want to watch the YouTube of that or whatever. I wanted to be there for it. And I remember running through a couple of airports trying to make the connector, knowing that I would make it so that I could be at the jazz concert, So, and I think I hit them all, and I might have missed one in both Matthew's time of when he was doing theater and Ryan when he was doing jazz. I think I hit, I want to say maybe I missed one or two, but I think I hit them all. So that was my professionalism. I will give you all the professionalism. I will make the reports. I will do whatever I can do. I will make those meetings. And then when the meeting is done, I'm going to go home to my family.
Yeah, I think there's seasons in life, and I don't think either one of us will sit here and say, hey, you're never going to work more than 40 hours. I mean, There's going to be a season where you've got to really punch it and push it, and you're going to be doing the 60 or 70 hours. But what I hear you saying, which is really cool, is there's just so many hours in a week. And when you have a family, even if you don't have a family and you're single, there are important people in your life that, number one, in order to stay sane, you need to stay engaged with them. And number two, life happens one time. And especially when you have kids, those kids are never going to remember what you did at work.
Right.
They're going to remember, I mean, maybe if you're the president of the United States or something, maybe that's a little different. But generally, they're never going to remember what you did at work. They're going to remember that you showed up for that event that was important to them when they were a kid. And they remember repetition too. So this was super important to me when I had my son. And that is, my dad loved me to death. I know he did. But I never remembered him saying, I love you. Now, I sat down and had a conversation with him about this, and he reminded me of certain times, and I was like, oh, man, I just didn't remember that. But repetition is a big deal. You know, being at not just one soccer game, but as many as you possibly can, kids will remember that. And I think that's a really cool thing that you did there when you went to work for Yamaha and at Disney, to say, hey, we're going to try to protect the after 40 piece, which belongs to my family. It doesn't necessarily belong to the company. And I think that's a great way of looking at your work-life balance, is saying, what is priority here? You know, obviously work's important, but if it's number one on the list, I think you may have a problem. Work is there to help facilitate your family life, right? Yeah.
And can I also add to that, in that, so we're talking about the us's of techs and the doers and that, but if there's anybody that's going to listen to this or watch this that might be a potential next gen HR person, or a church that has a board or whatever, I would love to tell those that are above me that, like, don't expect more than 40 hours, right? Maybe shoot your week to be 36 and you leave at 44, but you shouldn't be scheduling to 50. That's another human. You need a better management of how you are managing. I don't think that any company should have an expectation that you're going to go to work for 80 hours a week. I would love to push that on somebody above me to go, that's your professionalism? That seems kind of lazy and disingenuous, actually. I mean, those are maybe harsh words, but you be better at your management part. Don't expect that in your employees, especially your hourly employees. I don't know that I ever liked anybody taking advantage of staff people either, but your hourly employees, that should be right at 40. You should manage better.
What I like to do when I go in and consult with a church is I like to say, hey, how many of your employees are salaried? And what's interesting is at a lot of churches that we'll go talk to, they'll say all of them are salaried. And I said, that's impossible.
Right.
Not all of them can be salaried. And even if legally you could do that, there's a reason for overtime. And what I tell people is set up a system that pushes your people to manage their time better. If you have an employee that's consistently doing 10 hours of overtime, the system is going to naturally say, we need another employee. So if you're a church and you have somebody who's salaried and they're just burning out, it may be because you're not seeing how many hours they're actually working. And so one of the tools that I like to tell churches to do is if you have salaried staff, have them pretend they're hourly for a month and clock in and out and show you exactly what they're doing.
Right.
And then when they're saying, hey, I'm burnt out, and they show you this list, you can see, I guarantee you'll look at the list and you'll say, wait, you spent 10 hours on this? Why are you spending 10 hours on this? Well, I have to because of the edits and things of that nature. Maybe you need a second staff member to help offset those things, or maybe you need to take some things out of their schedule. But have those salaried team members or contract team members is another trap that churches fall into. They're like, hey, we'll pay you $400 to do this specific job for the week. And it ends up being 25 specific jobs for $400. Right. Well, but if you get a list from the person who's doing that contract work or the person who's salaried and they show you what all they're doing, you can make some decisions on that that'll help prevent them from being burnt out. And then if you can organize your system so that it helps, kind of rub and push against somebody working a lot of hours, like an hourly employee who's clocking into overtime. Overtime naturally pushes the organization to eliminate it by hiring, more people or bringing in more volunteers. Set your system up that way so that you can lead from a place of helping your team not burn out. Which brings me to my next question. There's a difference between a manager and a leader. In your mind, Dave, what's that difference?
I think a manager.
That's a great question, and Dave has an answer that will change how you lead. But we'll have to wait for part 2 of this episode to see what he has to say about that. Speaking of part 2, we have a special segment from B&H talking about a new tool they have launched for churches. If you want to be a better tech director or just have the latest insights on gear, then you don't want to miss this podcast. Well, that wraps things up for today's episode. I can't wait to talk to you on the next Tech Arts podcast. Until then, I'm David Leuschner, signing off by wishing you a great day and praying God blesses every moment of your week. See you soon.
You have been listening to the Tech Arts Podcast, presented by Digital Great Commission Ministries. DGCM is a 501c3 nonprofit that was started to help churches with all things technical. Whether you need help building a team, finding the right gear, or just a better understanding of the church tech world, DGCM is here for you. Find out more about our free on-site visits, reports, and consulting by going to audiovideolighting.com. Digital Great Commission Ministries will help you run your church service like a pro. Find out more at audiovideolighting.com. This podcast is brought to you by AC Lighting, world-class products with world-class service. aclighting.com.
From sold-out stadiums to intimate live performance venues, sound engineers agree on one thing for the best digital mixing consoles for live sound. The only name that matters is Digico. As the recognized worldwide standard for live audio mixing, Digico consoles are renowned for their industry-leading sound quality and ease of use. Whether your application is in a church, broadcast, theater, corporate, sports, or installed sound, Digico offers compact and affordable products. From the S21 all the way up to the pioneering power of the Quantum 852, Digico delivers the workflow, the feature set, and the absolute reliability that the world's biggest tours and programs have come to rely upon. If you're looking for a sound console, look to Digico for your answer. For more information on Digico, go to digico.biz. That's digico.biz. From front of house to center stage, for over 25 years, Earthworks microphones have sculpted the sounds of your favorite concerts, venues, and performances. Earthworks Audio is a sponsor of the Tech Arts Podcast. We are so happy to have them on board and excited to promote the new Earthworks SR117 vocal mic and capsules. To find out more about Earthworks Audio or to get your hands on this mic, go to earthworksaudio.com. That's earthworksaudio.com. Capturing emotion with sound. earthworksaudio.com.